Welcome to KINE2253, Motor Development Across the Lifespan. This lecture will discuss the first chapter of Lifespan Motor Development, the 7th edition by Haywood and Getchell. This lecture will provide supplementary examples and explanations to help provide a deeper understanding of the book chapter.
In this lecture, students will learn how we define what we mean by motor development and how it differs from other domains of developmental science and other domains of movement science. Students will also learn about constraints and how they interact dynamically to produce different types of movements at different times in an individual's life. Finally, students will learn how we measure developmental change and will be given some examples from different research studies. Let's begin by providing some definitions. Development is a continual change in function. It is a lifespan process. Development does not stop after infancy, childhood, or adolescence, but continues into adulthood and old age. Development is age-related, but not age-determined. For example, by the age of 1, many infants have started to learn to walk. However, just because a particular infant is 1 year old does not mean that he or she is definitely able to walk. Development is sequential. For example, you must first learn to walk before you can learn to run. Many different skills build upon each other. Development is also cumulative. For example, each day that I practice my free throw shot, I gain more and more experience and am able to fine-tune that skill. Development is multifactorial. This means that there are many factors that contribute to the functional changes observed. For example, an infant may learn to walk because he or she has enough leg strength to hold up his or her body upright. He or she is able to balance on one foot while he or she takes a step. He or she has a motivation to walk. He or she has the environment that is appropriate to enable walking. Lastly, development is individual. Although most individuals follow a similar pattern of motor development, which is thought to be driven by genetic or sociocultural factors, each child will learn and acquire skills at a slightly different rate and with a slightly different pattern of movement. There are 4 different domains of development: social or affective, in other words, emotional, cognitive, physical, and motor. As you can see, these different domains all have some overlap. For example, if a child goes through a growth spurt in physical development, this may change and influence his or her motor development. For example, being able to dunk a basketball. Similarly, when an individual develops a motor skill, he or she may also develop cognitive skills. For example, when you learn to play soccer, you not only learn how to move, but you learn the different rules, strategies, and problem-solving skills. These are all in the cognitive domain. In this class, we will use motor development as a window into understanding developmental changes across the lifespan. In particular, we want to know what processes and factors underlie changes in motor behavior. Motor development is one domain within the field of motor behavior. 2 other areas within this field are motor learning and motor control. Motor learning is primarily concerned with short or long-term changes in motor behavior that take place over a short period of time and the processes that underlie those changes. We think of things like practicing a skill or perfecting it under different conditions. For example, shooting a free throw shot or driving a car. Motor learning happens during development as well. For example, if we just look at the changes that take place right around the time an infant learns to walk, this could be considered a motor learning study. Motor control is another domain, which is primarily concerned with the neural, physical, and behavioral aspects of movement. In particular, this domain is interested in how the nervous system activates muscles to produce skillful and coordinated movements. As motor developmentalists, we are interested in how the development of movement skills are influenced by the development of the nervous system. When we put all of these things together, we see considerable overlap between these 3 domains of motor behavior. In particular, motor learning and motor control both involve changes over time. However, the key difference between these three domains is the time span of interest. In the case of motor development, we are concerned with big time frames like infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, old age, and the entire lifespan. Often development, growth, and maturation are used interchangeably. However, there are important differences between these different terms. As we have mentioned, development is a change in behavior or function and the processes that underlie those changes. In contrast, growth is a quantitative change in physical size, for example, height or weight. Maturation is a progress towards physical maturity, specifically biological readiness for reproduction. So this includes physical, hormonal, and reproductive system changes. Importantly, some aspects of growth are not related to maturation. For example, in aging, there is a quantitative decrease in muscle mass, but this has nothing to do with any change in biological readiness for maturity. Also, there are some aspects of maturation that are not related to growth. For example, changes in sex hormone levels don't necessarily affect growth. The take-home message, though, is that development continues after growth and maturation are complete. So in this diagram, it encompasses both of those terms, and it also includes many other things. Another important distinction is between the terms development and aging. Physiological changes continue across the lifespan, which impact functional movement abilities. Aging can be considered in two different ways. First, it can be considered simply the process of growing older or acquiring age, which means that you could be aging even as a child. Second, and more commonly, we often think of aging as the changes that lead to a loss of function or adaptability that eventually lead to death. As you can see, in order to understand precisely what I mean by motor development, one must understand these important terms and distinctions amongst these different terms. In the next video, we will change gears a bit and discuss the notion of constraints and how different factors interact dynamically to influence development.